Welcome to a late night large that got up early, ate your breakfast, and pissed in the sink. Taking incriminating photographs of the scene is me, Aaron Bliss, while crowdfunding for bail money for knocking over a multitude of pedestrians like Skittles because he had drunkenly fallen asleep at the wheel of the car he'd stolen to make his getaway from the budget hotel whose room he befouled on the night he had fled there from the police, wanting to question him for impersonating a police officer while soliciting prostitutes. Here's Mike Large.
What a wonderful introduction.
How you feeling, Mike? Presumably you managed to make bail, did you?
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Your fans got you out of trouble again.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah. Now you just need a good defence lawyer.
I'll defend myself.
Because that's worked out so well in the past.
I'm here.
I'm here, yeah, that's a good point. Okay. So, it's been a little while, but we're still in the midst of COVID madness, pandemia, still here, it's still queer, still demanding no more bears. So, Mike, the last sort of 10 days or so, sorry, just to say the inspiration for the title of tonight's show is...
Oh, yeah, explain that one.
Yeah, so I mean, if you didn't understand the whole sacrifice thing and the crow gods, it's related to the kind of dominant thing in the news cycle recently, which is the government kind of coughing and under their, like, in a very low, menacing voice, suggesting people should go back to their offices and places of business, or they might find themselves unemployed. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So there's that, mixed with the fact that I've noticed that a lot of people in emails, and I presume text messages, tend to misspell COVID as Corvid, because I think that's what the spell checker recommends, which Corvid is obviously the species name for crows. So that's how we get sacrificed to the crow gods, because we are effectively being asked to sacrifice ourselves for the economy, I would presume.
There are some people I wouldn't mind sacrificing.
Any names, Mike?
You know I'm not going to do that.
We're not going to hear Mike's shit list, no?
No, how long have we got?
That's true, it's only a half-hour show. Okay, so that's a good enough time as any to start. It's good enough place as any to start, Mike. So the big news cycle thing has been...
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how seriously... I mean, whichever side of the political spectrum you're on, I don't really know that many people who take government pronouncements that seriously now, when you look at how they've handled almost everything else during this pandemic, and the fact they have a rather burgeoning reputation for U-turns, doing the exact opposite to their policy 3 or 4 days later. I don't know how much impact this would have had, but clearly it's something that, I mean, I see it as transparent, but let me see what you think, Mike. So in the news, they were, Johnson and members of his cabinet were making noises about, we're not saying you have to go back to the office. We're just saying, if you don't, you could be looked upon more unfavourably when it comes to a round of redundancies. We're not saying you're definitely going to be redundant, but that'll be in the boss's head. So if they haven't seen you, then that you basically, apparently, it could give you an excuse to be sacked, which I don't think they realise kind of speaks more about shitty employers than anything else. But leaving that aside, Mike, do you think that was do you see where they were coming from? Do you think that was a helpful intervention? And what do you think's behind it?
Like I say, well, there's two bits there, isn't there? But it's obviously, there's a message, as there always is, I think, with when we get told stuff by Big Boris and his cronies. There is a message there, and do you know what? There is usually somewhere entangled in the blubbering, rambling mess that comes out of his mouth is a good message. There is actual kind of logic behind things that he's saying. He's saying things for a reason, or his buddies, his pals, his cronies are saying things for a reason, and there probably is. I mean, there is definitely, but generally, there probably is always a good kind of reason for it. Just sometimes how it's delivered isn't quite there, is it? Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean, though?
I think, yeah.
Because I'm not. What I'm saying is there a point to be made on the subject? Yeah, probably. Just maybe it didn't come across. It came across very much how you put it, which obviously wasn't how it was intended.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me lay it out. First of all, by the way, apologies to anyone watching this if the sound is slightly unsynchronized with the action, but the point is you can still hear us, so I'm afraid it's a weak connection or something. So my thinking behind this, Mike, is I think it's like anything that's this badly delivered, it's the same problem with it. So if we decode it, first of all, boil it down to the simplest element, what is the government saying? Like, it's absolute unfiltered, like the point of the message. The point of the message is, can people please go back to the office now? That's the unfiltered what they want to say. Now the problem is, so this is why they've worded it in such an ambiguous, contradictory, and mildly threatening way, is because if they were to just say that, if they were to just go on TV and say, okay, everyone, you've all had a nice time on furlough, and we've been, you spent a lot of time with the family, and that's good, but we forced those little buggers back to school, so you need to get back to the office because the boss needs to keep an eye on you, and you need to keep those sandwich shops open. If you say it like that, people roll their eyes and they say, "Fuck off, Boris." I'm reading that the R rate is pretty much the way it was when we went into lockdown, which is just as dangerous as it's ever been. I'm still just as likely to kill my elderly parents as I was before, and my boss is happy for me to do this. I'm not going back to the office. Why would I want to use up all my leisure time commuting, the thing that I always hated, just because you say you want to keep a few sandwich shops open? So what they do is they know that would come across really badly and it would make them look really bad. So what they then do is they cloak it in all kinds of other things. So they say, well, we can't make it as blunt as that. So we'll say really, and this is where I come back to a point I'm going to make later, Mike, which is the infantilization of political discourse.
Right.
So this is where it's almost like they patronize us because they think things are too complicated to explain the way they really are, or the nuance in an argument. So they have to dumb it down, patronize us, and say, so for instance, Mike, do you not think it's incredibly patronizing to tell grown adults, well, one of the positives about going back to the office is it's good for people to have human contact and for teams to meet and share their dynamic chemistry. And do you not think that is incredibly patronizing? That's the kind of thing you might teach in secondary school, but
yeah,
to say that to grown adults, it's so they had that problem as well, that they wanted to say that, but they couldn't outright say it as blunt as that, so they kind of softened it up, which made it sound exactly the same, just dumbed down and patronizing. So what I'm trying to say, Mike, is
go on.
Sorry, I'll let you speak in a sec. So anyway, to finish my point, what I think is the reason it sounded so ambiguous, contradictory, jumbled, weak but slightly threatening, just a complete mess. To me, it was because ultimately the core message was wrong. Because if you start, the whole thing about garbage in, garbage out. If you put really shit data into something, then the results and the analysis you get out are really shit because you can't convert bad data into good results. So that's what I see. It's a shit message. It's a message that doesn't make any sense unless, and I'll come to it later. What was your point, Mike? What were you
Well,
about
all I was going to say is it's not always. And I realised I probably sounded more like you than me in saying it, but like it's not always just dumbing down, is it? Sometimes it's just plain lying.
very, very true. Yes.
Sometimes there's a message that's put out in a way not because they're trying to dumb it down, just because they are just trying to deceive.
No, that's in fact. I mean, you made it a lot more blunt than I did. I think I was implying that, but I didn't make it very clear. Yes, I think the point is they were lying. If they weren't lying, like we say, let me suggest that if they were to be completely honest, what the statement would have been is, we need all of you to go back to the office because some extraordinarily rich rentiers with commercial properties are being hit now, and they're putting the squeeze on us, and they want businesses to go back to paying extortionate rents in high streets and city centres. So they need you all to go back and populate these offices to make sure that these rents are still being paid. But who gives a fuck about rentiers? No, nobody. But if you say, oh, the little sandwich shops, oh, is this the little independently run businesses? Is that little cafe owned by that, nice couple who live down the road? That's what I think you mean by deception. It's taking the real reason behind something and then putting a wall in front of it with a nice, pretty mural on it to cover up the real reason. No. Sorry, carry on.
Just on this, you've got I mean, it's quite clear where you sit on the whole let's get everyone back to the office kind of debate. That's not really a debate, is it? Thing that's going on at the moment. It's quite clear what your position is. Just one, like from your perspective, I mean, could you, or do you think there are enough valid reasons that aren't those that you clearly don't think are valid? So the reasons everything you've said is as why they are trying to get people to go back to the office, you've painted, and rightly so, as not good enough reasons. Do you think there are any good ones?
Yeah, I think you could make an. I think personally, if you if they were put into a battle together, then they wouldn't stand a chance against the reasons that we shouldn't do it. But yeah, I mean, the arguments that they make, some of them make relative sense. It is for some people, for other people it isn't. But for extroverts particularly, it is positive to be around teammates and colleagues. They get their energy from like the office gossip, catching up with such and such. What did you do at the weekend? Exchange, sometimes their ability to generate ideas and plans and whatever comes from bouncing off other people, and you can't generate, you can't replicate that chemistry via Zoom, even though we do. But yeah, I mean, and other than that, yeah, it's but for people, and I say this very carefully because I in no way want to endorse the government message, because to me the government message, whether you support them or not, is inherently wrong because we're in the middle of a pandemic. But aside from the government message, so a point they make can be right while also saying that the wider point is wrong. So another point is, if someone is a particularly low self-esteem, suffers from, say, depression, anxiety, the routine of getting out of bed, getting dressed, making yourself look presentable, going to work, interacting with, being forced to interact with people, can be very positive. That is true, as long as the job isn't hell on earth. The job kind of respects you, and you know what I mean. It's not like a Sports
I
Direct
don't.
house or Amazon warehouse, but yeah, that can be very positive for individuals' mental health. I've heard this point raised a couple of times, and to me, it will never ever sound right coming out of the mouths, really, of the government. The government should never say that, because it sounds incredibly patronising, and also very kind of, you don't want to go down the whole work sets you free thing. It kind of has sort of echo.
So yeah, no, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. So, do you think then that I mean, there's no other than the mental health of some people.
Yeah.
You don't think there's any other valid reason to get people?
Oh, let me think. We're talking about positive reasons then, not negative. Like,
Yeah, a reason to do it, a reason to get people back in.
again, the problem there, Mike.
Valid, acceptable reason.
Okay. I think what we need to do though is recognise when we say valid and acceptable, are we talking about valid and acceptable to the workers? Because of course, the argument is those points that we said were invalid. They are actually very valid if you're a rentier, if you're a very rich rentier, or you donate to the Conservative Party, etc., etc.
Right. So what I'm trying to do, and what I'm trying to do, is get you to put yourself in. So right? Okay. You are PM, Prime Minister Bliss.
Okay.
Right.
God help him.
Obviously, I get some sort of nice cushy job out of that. Appreciate it. But yeah, so you're the Prime Minister, right? And I mean, can you think of a reason to get people to go back? So your advisors are saying we probably need to get people back in the office now. Can you think of a good enough reason other than it's obviously you tore apart what I actually said. So other than it could be good for the mental health of some extroverts, can you think of an actual reason, not just for the people necessarily? And I do understand that is and should always be the most important thing, but there are other factors as Prime Minister that you'd have to consider. Can you think of what any of them are?
Are you trying to patronise me, Mike? Because I don't know whether you're asking me this legitimately.
No, yeah, I'm asking you legitimately.
All right. So, stepping outside my proletarian roots and looking at it from the point of view of the government, particularly this government, I think effectively this is quite obviously we need to save the economy. This is when people are outside of their homes, they're more likely to circulate money in different places. They're more likely to decide, oh, I fancy a new pair of shoes on the way back to the train. Or, it's not just about buying lunch at Pret a Manger or wherever it is. It is about, as soon as people are outside the house, they are far more likely to circulate and spend money in different places. Which again goes back to, if they're inside the house, they're far less likely to do that, or if they are, they will order things online, which doesn't help the high street. So yeah, I definitely think just saving the economy is obviously a wider concern. But again, you then come back to it, Mike, and there are other ways. And again, this is part of what politics should be. There's clearly another way to save the economy other than forcing people to sacrifice themselves in a pandemic?
Go. What is it?
Okay, well, to dumb it down into, the current political dumbing down kind of thing. So an economy, if you treat an economy like the circulatory system, right? So the idea is the heart, i.e. the controller of the economy, let's say the government. I know people will say, oh no, it's the private sector, but the government effectively can affect everything, whether they want to or not. So if the government is the heart and the economy is the circulatory system, i.e. you try and pump blood as widely around as possible. Some would argue that our blood flow is far too powerful in a certain circle and very weak around the outer edges.
We've all got very cold fingers and toes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way. So basically, what I would say is every government ultimately, particularly while we live in this model, because it's a capitalist model. So the idea is, how is an economy healthy? The more money that's circulating, the healthier an economy is. The more blood that's circulating, the healthier an economy is. Again, then we come back to where is it circulating? But just basic. We need more circulation, more blood. So how do we get more blood? Now, if you're a Conservative Party MP, who obviously traditionally and still do represent the ruling class and the people who already have capital and land, etc., you will say that the best way of getting more money in circulation is getting people out and about in as many places as possible so they can spend their pennies here and there. But then, of course, if you look at the opposite end of the scale, there's another way of circulating money, whereas there also a lot of money that at the moment is not getting spent. Wealth that's being siphoned away. And that is also money that can be circulated. And you say, oh, well, you can't force rich people to go and buy lots of clothes on the high street. Well, no, because that's not how it works, circulating that money. That money needs to be taxed. And then the government then uses that to stimulate demand by paying for infrastructure projects, building new roads, bridges, dams, I don't know, overpasses, hospitals, schools. So that's not rocket science. That's basic Keynesian economics.
So you're saying tax the rich?
I mean, that's generally always the solution, Mike. You can be creative about the means, but that's always the solution. Okay, I'll tell you what. Rather than saying the rich, because that implies that it's a class war thing, remove the personhood away from them. Just look at it in the cold hard light of day. Where is money? Where is the money in this country? The money at the bottom is continually circulating because nobody can afford to save any of it. So that's always moving around. Where's the clogged arteries? Legitimately, that's what I mean. Forget about the people, just the money, cold hard money. Where are the clogged arteries? It's not down at the bottom.
I get that.
So to me,
I'm not saying I disagree. I just think that they've already paid tax on any money they've got stashed away, right? When they earned it or inherited it or however they got it, it's been taxed.
Right. So what is there a divine law that
You're saying you should have a tax on you got a bank account, a savings account, and if you're wealthy, you might have a particularly big one. It should get taxed for sitting there,
amongst other things. Yeah. I mean, Mike, this could be an entire show if I told you about what taxes I pay.
So if I'm saving up money,
yes,
I should pay tax, albeit it would be a smaller amount, but I'm assuming it would be as a percentage, right? So I should any money I'm trying to stash away to save up for anything, I should be taxed on just while it's sat there. So I've already earned it.
I think
Paid my tax.
Mike, we already do. I don't know if you're aware of this, but you already do. Because you have to put money into an ISA to avoid being taxed on it. If you don't put it into an ISA and you're like sticking away tens of grands, you'll be taxed on that. Because the whole point of an ISA is you don't get taxed on it.
Right.
Yeah. So
you're saying you should? Well, that's what I'm saying. So, sorry, maybe I should have been more specific.
okay.
But so you're saying there shouldn't be that tax-free. So I put money into an ISA and I should be taxed on it. So I shouldn't.
No, because Mike, you're conflating the two. You're saying that you should be treated the same way as someone who's got all the wealth in the world, and that's obviously not what we're saying. And that's how the argument keeps getting lost. Is that so? For instance, I support. I think the best tax that could ever be applied in this country would be land value tax. It's the only tax that I can think of or that I've read about that cannot be avoided because you can't hide land. Once you've declared it in your name, that land is yours to be taxed. So the idea of land value tax, without going on forever, is basically you use that land for a purpose. It either needs to be public access, and it needs to have some financial purpose, whether that's agriculture or trust land that people get to visit and pay for, or just completely wild and allowing wildlife and shrubbery and everything to just grow and wild on there. But it has to have a specific purpose. If you just fence that off and don't do anything with it, just hoard it and keep people away from it, and it's not serving an economic purpose or say a social purpose, then you're subject to land value tax. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sure we can go into more depth in other shows, Mike, but that's an example.
We'll cover that. I'm sure we've probably covered it at some point.
I think we did do a show on tax, but I'm not sure how deep we went into it.
I like to think we went really deep.
I was wondering when you're going to come up with that. By the way, just on a slightly different subject to COVID. In fact, I mean, it's kind of related to COVID because who's one of the worst countries in the world dealing with COVID? The USA. So
depends how you look at it. You could call them the worst.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So do you remember? Because of course this happened nearer to where we live. The fatal incident with Harry Dunn, where the wife of the US diplomat coming out of the Air Force Base in Croughton on the wrong side of the road, hit and killed Harry Dunn, a teenager on his moped, I believe. Now, I'll try and just make this a quick one, but I drove past there the other day, drove past the airbase, right? Yep. And I don't know if you've been keeping up to date with developments. So, again, sometimes you need to remove the labels from things. So let's forget the label American or US of A. If somebody's spouse goes into a foreign country and hits and kills a native and then flees the country without facing justice, who legitimately thinks that is something that should be allowed to happen? Legitimately. So this is what I'm saying. So as soon as you remove the American thing, almost everyone would agree you can't go to someone else's country, whether it's accidental or not. The point is you face justice. You kill someone, you have to answer questions at least in front of a jury, whatever, as to how this came about, whether it's an inquest or an actual trial. So she fled a foreign country under false pretenses as well, because she tried to claim diplomatic immunity, which I understand she wasn't entitled to. And then the US, because they're a big bully of a country, decided, no, we're not going to allow you to extradite her because she's an American citizen. Meanwhile, we're crawling on our hands and knees begging for a trade deal with them. And then some people would say part of the reason we're not making a bigger stink about them killing one of our citizens and running away is that we don't want to upset them. So I don't know if you remember as well, the family of Harry, I think, travelled to America to discuss it. And Donald Trump used it as an excuse to try and trick them by having the woman who killed their son in the next room and saying, basically, we're going to just open the door and then you can have a chat. And they were like, no, we're not doing that. You know, we wouldn't have even come if you said she was in the next room. They wanted things to be done properly. They want a trial. They want her to answer questions about how it happened and apologize, whatever. So that's the best they got out of America. And America basically refused to, compromise with it. I drove past there the other day, and do you know what I noticed there, other than the flowers and tribute to Harry and a picture of his face, which I think is really cool. He's got his, a memorial there. That's very cool. But do you know what else I noticed? Arrows painted all along the road, pointing in each direction, and on the back of some of the road signs, please drive on the left. Now, those weren't built by volunteers. We've spent our own money putting in place road markings and road signs for foreigners who have killed one of our citizens and fled justice. So rather than actually force justice to get an extradition back, we have hung our head, mumbled about something, and spent taxpayers' money putting in place signs that every native of Britain or person who's lived here for more than a couple of years already knows what to do. I just wanted to put that out there, Mike, because to me that sums up how powerless we are now in terms of international diplomacy. That's how we react to one of our own citizens being killed.
Yeah, agreed. Very tenuous link to
COVID.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I'll tell you where the link was. The US.
What was your segue? US are shit.
Yeah, the US are shit at COVID.
They passed 6 million yesterday cases, I think.
See, I knew you'd come out with a nice fact sooner or later. So well done for that, Mike.
It was yesterday or within the last couple of days.
That's pretty incredible, don't you think? I mean, if a country tried to do it worse than that, they'd struggle.
Yeah.
6 million.
Yeah. Not bad going, is it?
Particularly since the vast majority of the country doesn't have healthcare either.
Nice little money spinner.
Yeah. Well, there you go, because you're forcibly creating customers.
I'm not sure we should say that. I'm sure that
people watching will understand that was a very cynical, scathing remark, not meant to trivialize the fact that people potentially have lost their lives and their health. It's taking the piss out of the ridiculous American healthcare joke of a healthcare system. Anyway, we'll I'm sure that'll all change in November, or will it? Anything else, Mike, about the recent the last couple of weeks in terms of COVID in this country? It's got a bit quiet, really, other than the whole threatening back to the office thing.
The results kind of mess. That got sorted out eventually, didn't it? With the A-level and GCSEs and all that. And since then,
did it get sorted out though? Because by the way, yeah, quickly on that one, you say it got sorted out. Basically, they capitulated, yeah. But one could argue if it's sorted out, Gavin Williamson should have resigned, which he didn't do. And also, I mean, I don't think it's so much him sticking in place, because we all saw what happened with Dominic Cummings. That's what happens in a Johnson government. Loyalty to him is the only thing he cares about, not competence. Besides, it makes him look better the more incompetent his ministers are. But the fact that Williamson didn't go, which, by the way, ministers used to resign at like even a fraction of this kind of incompetence. But it wasn't the fact that he didn't go, it's the fact that other people lost their jobs because of it. So what was it, the head of Ofqual? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of Quangos, but the head of Ofqual was effectively sacrificed. I can't remember if there was another representative head teachers or something. I don't know whether there was someone else who resigned over it. But obviously Boris Johnson forced out the head of the civil service, and he's now appointed one of his cronies to head that. Now, I mean, that's a bit worrying because civil service, I mean, we all know they're probably a certain way politically, but they're supposed to be neutral. You're supposed to only promote people based on ability, not if they favour a particular prime minister or party, or say agenda. And Johnson is kind of, I know a lot of people will say, "Oh, what do I care about that? I don't care about the civil service." But these are the kind of things that corrupt dictatorships start to do, which is populate every major position within a government of people who only agree with them. And then, of course, what happens if Johnson fucks off in 6 months? Or more likely gets sacked by his party for being a blundering idiot. What happens then? Because, that potentially stifles democracy. If a party came in that had different opinions and views of Boris Johnson, quite really different views, and they came in, the head of the civil service is supposed to do what the government asks. And if you've got someone who viscerally disagrees with the government that's in charge, you're potentially having them deliberately sabotaging things that you're trying to put into place. So that's where it gets dangerous. Appointing cronies it's all very well giving your cronies a place in the House of Lords, which we'll roll our eyes at because they're going to do that. We can't do anything about that. But putting cronies, another crony at the top of the BBC, it's the kind of thing they do in North Korea. Kind of put everyone who agrees with them at the head of the state broadcaster. I'm just saying, these are things that didn't used to be crony appointments, and it's a bit. I'm saying right now we're obviously not North Korea. What I'm saying is there's some worrying signs there. Yeah. Anything to add, Mike? Sorry,
No,
anything to add?
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah.
Don't worry, we won't turn into North Korea for a good 3 or 4 years. It's fine.
Yes. Well, I think that's about all we got time for, Mike. So, anything to add to the discussion before we depart for? I'm sure there'll be next week.
Yeah, I mean, we've rambled on for enough. I think long enough, probably.
Well, Parliament's back now. School's back, so there's bound to be a spike soon. Second wave incoming, so maybe that'll be the title of the next video. So I hope all of you enjoyed the first lockdown, because the second lockdown is going to be a lot of fun. And until next time, Mike.
Good night.
And good night from me.